Even Transformers like a refreshing drink now and then, and this week Patreon supporter Jolene Blake, aka Broadside, has requested the basics on the most famous bar on Cybertron, MACCADAM'S Old Oil House. Located in the city of Iacon, MACCADAM'S is neutral ground in the Transformers war. Whether Autobot or Decepticon, any bot who can pay is welcome to stay and enjoy a quart of oil or a cube of energon. Of course, allowing different factions to mix does sometimes have volatile results, but generally customers try to keep their heads down and just enjoy their drinks, as the bar's mysterious owner takes a dim view of fighting in his establishment. MACCADAM'S Old Oil House was created in 1986 by writer Simon Furman for the Transformers comic published in the United Kingdom by Marvel. The bar was introduced in issue 82 of the series as an underground speakeasy on Decepticon-controlled Cybertron, where bots of any affiliation could come to drown their sorrows in black market booze. The story featured the bar's musical entertainer, a Transformer who turned into a piano, being beaten up by a Decepticon bully named Fang, until the Autobot wrecker Twin Twist stepped in to give Fang a taste of his own medicine. The bar reappeared in just one more story in the comic, in 1989's issue number 240, by which time its neutral status had collapsed, and its only customers were Decepticons. Visiting the bar in disguise to meet an informant, Autobot Quickswitch wrecked the joint while fending off an attack by the metal-munching aliens, the MACCADAM'S. That was the last that would be seen of MACCADAM'S for 15 years, until Furman included the bar in a list of notable Iacon landmarks in his 2004 guidebook, Transformers: The Ultimate Guide. The book massively raised the bar's profile. From there, it soon began appearing in other media, and before long had become a fixture of Transformers lore. No longer the underground establishment seen in the Marvel comic, but a popular public business that went on to show up, or at least get name-checked, in almost every major Transformers continuity. Some notable stories to feature MACCADAM'S over the years have included the Transformers Cybertron comic book published by the Transformers Collectors Club in 2005, which marked the first appearance of the bar outside of a Generation 1 based story, the Transformers animated cartoon, which in 2009 featured the Old Oil House's first appearance on television, and IDW Publishing's comic books, in which it famously played host to the bar fight that led to the wrongful arrest of a young miner named Megatron, putting him on the path that led him to found the Decepticons. War would eventually result in the closure of MACCADAM'S, but in later IDW stories, after the conflict came to an end, Autobot racer Blur took over ownership of the derelict bar, fixing it up and reopening it to the public, turning it into the hot spot on post-war Cybertron. For much of Transformers history, the Old Oil House's unseen owner, the eponymous MACCADAM himself, was an enigma. The Ultimate Guide was the first place that any information was revealed about him. It described him as a mysterious and rarely seen bot, about whom there was much drunken speculation by the bar's patrons. Their popular, if outlandish, theory was that he was one of the legendary Primes, the first 13 Transformers created in the primordial past by Primus, the god of light, and that the Old Oil House itself existed outside of normal space and time. Now, the book didn't necessarily intend for this idea to be taken seriously. It was, after all, just a silly theory made up by drunks. But the concept would influence the prose story Prime Spark, published as part of the Transformers Legends anthology in late 2004, which depicted MACCADAM'S as a kind of crossroads between life and death, where the spirits of various different incarnations of Optimus Prime and Optimus Primal from across the multiverse met to share a drink. The identities of the Primes were still mostly a mystery when the Ultimate Guide made this claim, but in the years that followed, as Hasbro assembled their definitive list of the group's 13 members, they ignored the idea that MACCADAM was one of them, and didn't include him in its finalized roster. This decision was supported by the 2014 novel Transformers Retribution, Set within the continuity of the Transformers Prime animated series, this novel featured the first official appearance of McAdam in any media, and depicted him as a regular old robot, revealed to have always been hiding in plain sight by masquerading as his bar's piano player. The book detailed how, after Iacon was conquered by the Decepticons, McAdam closed down the old oil house and turned it into the hub of an underground resistance network dedicated to taking the villains down. However, nothing's ever simple in the world of the Transformers, and what's true in one story or continuity isn't always true in another. The following year, in 2015, a gathering of the 13 Primes featured in the Collectors Club comic included among their number a robot based on one of the old oil house's bartenders, a blue robot with a mustache. First seen in Marvel number 240, then in the illustration of the bar in the Ultimate Guide, and in a few other comic cameos after that. The club then was retroactively declaring that this bartender actually was McAdam himself, and that in this story, he was one of the Primes after all. But this invited the question, if McAdam was secretly one of the Primes, which one was he? Well, the same year, I was a contributor to the club's online Q&A column, Ask Vector Prime, and in one of the entries that I helped to write for it, I suggested a possible answer. McAdam might be Alchemist Prime. Alchemist Prime was the 6th of the 13 Primes created by Primus. As described in the 2013 guidebook, The Covenant of Primus, Alchemist was a kindly, intellectual robot with the ability to manipulate and transmute matter, whose personal artifact of power, the lenses, allowed him to perceive the hidden secrets of both the material and spiritual worlds. He was good friends with the historian Alpha Trion, and when the Age of Primes came to an end and most of the 13 disappeared from Cybertron, Alchemist was the only Prime other than Trion to remain on the planet to help the emerging Transformer race found a civilization, but his whereabouts in the present day were unknown. This, coupled with the fact that in his few brief appearances in IDW's comics, he had been shown to be very fond of a drink, made Alchemist a plausible candidate for the true identity of McAdam. Now, Ask Vector Prime only presented this idea as if it was one of the many rumours surrounding McAdam, not a definite fact. But in 2018, the Transformers Cyberverse animated series took the idea and ran with it. This series marked McAdam's first appearance in animation, and in this version of the story, he was indeed secretly Alchemist Prime. Eons ago, during the Age of Expansion, he had been part of the crew of the giant city transformer Iaconus, a titan built for war and colonization. When Iaconus proved unable to adapt to peacetime and turned against his fellow Transformers, McAdam was forced to deactivate him and bury him beneath the surface of Cybertron. Only the topmost level of Iaconus's body emerged from the ground, a building that McAdam turned into his old oil house. McAdam's powers of perception granted him knowledge of the future, which he tended to casually drop into conversation, making the jolly old barkeep seem quite eccentric to his patrons. But his heavily armed alternate mode, so terrifying that it was only ever seen in shadow, ensured that nobody ever broke his strict rule against fighting in his bar. When the alien Quintessons invaded Cybertron, McAdam served as a hideout for the Resistance, until they reactivated Iaconus to help fight the invaders. In the battle that followed, McAdam was killed saving Hot Rod from one of the Titan's stray shots, but it was a fate that he met willingly, having long ago foreseen the moment of his own death. In the wake of the Quintessons' defeat, Perceptor took over ownership of McAdam's and continued to supply Cybertron with refreshment as it worked to rebuild. So that's the story of how what was once just an unassuming little Cybertronian night spot became entangled in the deep lore of the Transformers universe, culminating in the release of a toy of McAdam in the Cyberverse toy line in 2020, a non-transforming Build-A-Figure made out of pieces packed in with other toys. That's it for this episode, and after all that, I don't know about you guys, but I could use a drink. And those are the basics on McAdam and his old oil house. Thanks to Jolene for sponsoring this episode. If you've enjoyed it, you can support the series on Patreon too, or just like and subscribe for more history and lore from the world of the Transformers.